Hello and welcome back to my channel, and thanks for joining me on and you might say not another channel update, Brian, but I do have quite an important announcement to make today. The major announcement being that I have now reached 1,000 subscribers. Yay. So thank you everyone. I am absolutely delighted. I did think I said on a previous video that I'd probably faint. I have now managed to get myself up off the carpet. The last push, I must admit, I did resort to some skullduggery. I think I was at 995, so I downloaded a picture of my cat, which I used as my thumbnail. And as per Lord Kitchener, or I presume in America it would be Uncle Sam, I sent it out as a poster. Do your duty. Do your duty for the channel. And that seemed to instill enough interest from friends and family that I managed to get another 5 subscribers and get me over the 1,000. But I think yes, I think you can forgive me for that. Just final push. As I say, I'm absolutely delighted. I really do appreciate the fact that people have subscribed to the channel. They find it of interest, and as an occasion, I thought I would maybe just reflect a little on some of the things that I've done over that time, and how the channel's evolved, and how I have taken in some of the information, some of the feedback that I've got from subscribers, and also just some reflection on some of the campaigns that I'm now running just now, and maybe just highlighting what I think are some of the more distinctive features about about each of the individual campaigns, the style that I try to have for them, and just whether you think that kind of matches up with what I am actually trying to deliver in those respects. And also I do have another bit of an announcement again, which I'm going to leave towards the end, and it is a thought that I've been kind of distilling over about the last month or so, and it's probably come to a head quite pertinently from some of my recent play experience. It's nothing sinister. It's actually going to be very complementary to the type of stuff that I do. In fact, it might even embed it and entrench it a bit more. So let's just get cracking. I've drawn up some, as I do, some of my notes. I do have some ongoing supporters. I've got all my little pawns out to celebrate, of various different types from various different campaigns. I've got the Brian's Channel mug. The Red Dragon is quite ecstatic with all this. The Krakow Dragon is here to celebrate too, so we're all here. The thumbnail I'm going to use to this video will be my cat. I think it has pulled in probably as many subscribers as myself. It is a major channel beneficiary on the basis that it loves listening to my videos, and not really, it does sometimes look at my hands and see how they move, and it probably doesn't quite understand why it can see my hands on the screen and at the same time see my hands in front of it. But it does seem to like my voice, and it quite often just purrs and sleeps beside me. Moving on, I started the channel on the 19th of January 2025, and I must admit, after I finished that first video, even though I enjoyed it and whatever, I was very nervous, and I had a bit of a slight wavering, a slight crisis of conscience, and I thought, am I doing the right thing? Am I really wanting to carry forward? A bit of a confidence crisis thing. But then I had, almost as it evolved through the second video, the concept of presenting the channel as a cooperative game, not just feedback on my own game, which was my initial view, because I'd been soloing a AD&D campaign myself, and I was just going to present the outcomes of that on the channel. And so this was what I call my light bulb moment, my St. Paul on the road to Damascus. I saw the light, and I realized I should get the audience involved by actually performing the campaign live on camera. Um, and thereafter, I think my enthusiasm and my confidence grew from then on, and my style became far more relaxed, and also in in relative terms, my enjoyment increased and increased, and I just could not stop myself from producing these videos. Um, I dropped the background music. Hooray! I think after episode 7. Um, I am still trying to get rid of some of the background music on some of these, and I think I have explained in previous announcements that it's not that easy because it makes you sound as though you're underwater when you take the music off. It must take away some of the nuances of your speech, so it does sound as though I am at 30 meters underwater. But that being said, I decided to have a policy change, drop the background music. And I also, later on, Traveller came along and I decided to expand the games covered. And by that stage, I was getting a bit more with it and how to produce the videos. So I came, certainly with my Traveller one, I thought, right, I'm going to have an ordered plan for how I'm going to present this. So I started with a kind of an arc of how I should present my campaign on camera. So I would start with how my influences and how I started and what my science fiction interests were. And then I would just go through individual stages. So I'd have an ordered plan, a process, a style, and a character for each of those games. And I think I just replicated that for my RuneQuest, and I've done it for my BX. And it does seem to be a model that I just quite like doing. It gives you a chance to see, well, under the hood a bit of what I'm thinking on my approach to the game, what my relevant experience is, whether I am talking, I'm talking, telling you the truth about that I've been involved in these things, or what is the level of my exposure to these games in the past. And as I say, I think that model worked. And I think if I was taken back to 19th of January, with hindsight, I would be doing my AD&D campaign from that basis. But really, I kind of had a standing start back then, and I have to forgive myself if it's rough around the edges. Um, it was maybe a bit raw and whatever, but I now feel with my AD&D campaign, I'm really enjoying it, probably even more than I was even at the start. And who could say that after I think 89 sessions I have as videos on YouTube, and it really gets more exciting every time I think the last one I really was on, kind of like shaking with the characters in that stream with that tide, and then Arian kept on falling over and stuff. It was quite exciting, and then I've got a causeway to come up in the next one, so wow. Yeah. Also, I have cross-fertilization of learnings, and what that means is I am taking learnings from each of the games that I'm presenting and repopulating them and planting them as little nuggets of information and ideas in each of those games. So I think it's a win-win. The more games I play, the more I seem to be able to. The worry was that I was going to be overwhelmed and diluted. But I think so far, and certainly keeping this core 4 as being my primary objective, I don't think I'm too overstretched. I think if I was doing maybe 6 or 7 to that same level, I would be finding it difficult to keep up. But as long as I keep the core 4, and then anything else that comes along is more not a one-off, but it's more a special. It's more a kind of passion project. It'd be done like once every couple of weeks, or maybe every 3 or 4, that type of thing. It's not going to be like a regular type occurrence. And the final thing, I think, on just how it has evolved, I've got a far more interactive approach. So that's come from, I think BXD&D did that for me, because I decided the way I structured the BXD&D, I wanted it in kind of little segments. and it would go logically, and I would right from the word go, I'd have action. I'd have people doing things and people being involved in the inn, and people being involved in the town, and just even coming up to the town and discovering what it was all about. I wanted some action right from the go, and I think that the major beneficiary of that has been RuneQuest, because I have applied that within the constraints and also the character of the RuneQuest rules back into that campaign. And just overall, the philosophical basis of the channel, I'm saying the philosophical basis of the channel remains grounded and will always be so. So what I mean by that is that I will only present the old school games I have direct experience of. And I always have to put my hand on my heart and say, actually, for BX, I haven't played that directly, but I feel like I have because of all my Homes experience. And I'm projecting Homes into BX. So the way I'm playing BX is how I would play Homes. So just imagine it is Homes, and it's got levels. I think it went up to level 3, didn't it, in Homes? I'm now up to level 15 on Homes. But I've got all these other nice little neat rules that experts got, which I never had access to back in the day. I've got a retro narrative style and presentation. So that's the way I kind of present myself and my style. I quite like a narrative style. I like to talk, you might have noticed. And also an explanation of my thought process. And I think that's quite important, just to almost explain what I'm thinking at the time. And could do that kind of and yeah, that sort of, I don't mind that if you can persevere and put up with it. I think it's quite nice to see people going through their thought process. Not maybe ad infinitum, like I do just try and consider things and think maybe if there's a few options, maybe go through the different options and come up with a rationale. Or if there's an interesting thing, I quite like to maybe just go off on a tangent and discuss it. Yeah, I think one of the things I tried to do with the channel was produce something that I would want to watch, and I think I have said this a few times. That is my criteria, and I like to watch that sort of thing, so that's why I kind of do it. The next thing is, now this isn't a badge of honor, but I think it's just, I have a minimalist production values, and I rely on imagination and visualization. So, I've actually gone to town a wee bit today, because I actually went out to a place called Hobbycraft, which is in the UK. It's a bit similar to, I don't know if you've got it's a kind of Walmart thing, where it specifically majors on hobbies, and you get craft stuff and things, bits of paper and art equipment. And I got these backdrops. I got different coloured ones, so I'm going to be using them as the backdrops, appropriate to each of the campaigns. So I'll have black for Traveller, I've got grey for AD&D. I'm going to test the gold one for RuneQuest. And I've got my red one again for BX. So there's not going to be too much of a change, but it's just that they're quite nice surfaces just to have and to do stuff on. And as you see, I use all my little pawns. I don't really have too many, and I've just got little cardboard things for rooms, and then I draw on the rooms, yeah, I think that was my ethos behind that was I was trying to do what we used to do back in the day. So I'll just continue with that. I go at my own pace. I use my own solo mechanics. I follow my own approach. Yeah, that probably just sums me up. And that will continue. I think I'll just carry on meandering through each of these rule systems. And if you want to come along with me on the journey, you're more than welcome. My enthusiasm is still very high, and my engagement in the comments. Yeah, I have definitely mentioned this, that I really enjoy the comments. You might have noticed from some of my answers, if you do scan through some of the things I say, I really sometimes I just can't stop myself sometimes. I just go on and on and on. And it's, as I think I've mentioned before, it's almost like my thought process is coming out. And I do come up with some quite novel little ideas too. So you are a stimulus to me, your comments. I welcome them. Carry on. I really enjoy getting lots of comments. I love it when YouTube just pops up a little notification and it's got like a little start of the line saying Brian such and such and such on your channel, and I have to go into it and read it all, and I think, yeah, I've got a chance to give a bit of an answer on that. So I do really enjoy that, and I do like the interaction with, now that I've got 1,000 subscribers, you know, hopefully we're going to have lots of nice comments and engagement from that. And finally, my guiding mantra: if I do what gives me enjoyment, others will like it too. So, you know, it's quite a simple mantra, but I think I've tried to apply, you know, not to get too stressed about maybe what other people think or whatever. I've reached that age now. I'm 60 plus. You know, I've gone through people criticize me and at work and whatever, and you have to kind of just sort of put up with it, and you go through all the stress of that. But now I'm beyond that. And you know, should you really care what people think? Of course you should. You should think about people's feelings. But fundamentally, I am doing this as a passion project for myself. If it gives me enjoyment, I am hoping that I can take you along. If you don't like it, like anything in life, you have the choice. You know, I'm not going to give any trigger warnings or whatever. Just don't watch it if you don't want to. You know, that would be, I think that's probably the best, the most grounded advice that I can give. But hopefully you do like it, and you like my style. That will continue. So I'm just saying that in terms of the channel timeline and milestones, this remains the same and always will be. Okay, so let's move on to some. This was quite an interesting exercise when I actually started jotting down, because I thought, wouldn't it be quite interesting to find out just what I think of each of my individual campaigns and what is the unique experience. So an attempt to have that's really kind of my ethos with each of these individual sub-channels, is to attempt to have a specific playstyle and provide an experience which reflects my own appraisal of the rules and the solo game and setting I want to play. So hopefully that sums up what I'm trying to extract what I find special in each of these games, and present it as a solo game, and create my setting the way I want the setting to be. So if I want, say, with my barony in BXD&D, and I want all the fantasy tropes that I can lay my hands on, and it might not seem as realistic as, say, my Northern Marches, I don't care, because that's the type of style I want to do in that game, and that's why I envision. So if I go into a bit more detail and I go through each of these, you can compare and see whether I measure up to what I'm talking about, because you have experience of it. So let's start off with the core of the channel, which is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, the Northern Marches. Christened very early, I realized I wanted a march area in basically quite a frontier region, a wilderness type environment, and boy have I got one in the Northern Marches. It's very low population, a few scattered settlements of demi-humans that are emerging, but basically just a few tiny little pinpoints of civilization in a morass of wilderness. With the actual game itself, I wanted a detailed and granular play style. So I think I probably demonstrated that, because I do go into a lot of detail, and I think I remember saying I specifically wanted to try out every single rule that I can get my hands on in the game. I'd be doing things like encumbrance, I'd be doing things like spell components, and when I do these things, I try and go into as much detail as possible and try to be as faithful to them as possible. A bottom-up, randomly designed campaign setting with an emphasis on realism and believability. Now, I think I've maybe delivered that because it has all been randomly designed with a few interventions that we've done, but nothing really radical. And I would say just to enhance and improve the campaign setting. It's definitely been bottom up because I've just designed it from, I haven't maybe put a grand overview on it saying these are the conflicts of good and evil and all that kind of stuff. I think the most I've done is maybe a background history to us, saying the event and the old empire, just to kind of shape the overall, I suppose, the historical rationale. And I've tried to go for realism and believability, so I've grounded it in I think a 12th, 13th century analog to the Scottish English border area, with a feudal 12th century culture as being the human dominant one. And the evolution of the setting I've tried to do I try to perform in logical process steps and stages, but try to show some flexibility to modify them at each stage. So not being prescriptive, being willing to make some changes as and when. Steady pace, indulging tangents, narrative investment, character identification, and development. Yes, that's the whole story, isn't it? I call it a steady pace. Some people might say glacial. I say steady pace. I do indulge my tangents. I go off on things I like to explore. It's a narrative investment. I like to talk about the things that I'm doing. I like when I'm going through areas, I like to describe them. I'm going to have a lot more narrative in some of the dungeon stuff that I'm doing, but even in the limited dungeon, well, I say limited, I have actually done quite a lot of episodes on dungeon exploration. Dunmornar is a case in point. But I do like to describe things. I like to describe people. I like to describe places. And then I really think it's important to have character identification. And I think we have grown quite attached to our little band of characters. And they do have their own personalities and their own kind of almost like their dreams. And they are definable. I feel quite comfortable playing with them. I like that character identification. And I am developing them. They may be going at a very slow pace level-wise, but we're only up to the third week, if you think about it. So, yeah, that says everything. And I keep on saying I'm going to have to try and speed things up and go, but I just don't know how to do it yet. I'm going to have to come up with a kind of catalyst to get thing going. Also, social interactions as important as adventuring. I think this is important because people might say, well, all you do is you have your little things talking to each other in the inn or whatever, or in the castle. But I think that's important. I like it. I think having that role play stuff and them talking and finding out things. Just excuse me a minute while I just take a wee drink. Yeah, I think I wouldn't say maybe as important. Maybe that's a bit strong, as important as adventuring, but it's a very important part of the campaign for me. I enjoy it a lot, so it's going to continue. Mini games, more mini games. Yep, that's what you get with me on AD&D First Edition. I've got a mini game for everything. We've had quite a few good fun ones. I think I'm exporting the mini game concept to all my other campaigns. Hopefully lots of people watching this are going to be doing lots of mini games all over their campaign. They're great fun. We were doing them way back in the 1978 onwards. Usually involving like barroom brawls or gambling or something. But it can be for anything. I suggested things like a tournament or I quite often do my little inn thing. I had the crime stuff. I also had the trial of the unfortunate chap that lost his head, the guard, the captain of the guard, who I always forget his name because it was a rather strange name, but he lost his head. That was a mini game. That was fun. Yeah, it was a good bit. Well, not just really for light relief, but just for a different kind of experience embedded in. So that will continue. I have ambitious plans and for this campaign, and expansion into all aspects of AD&D in the future. So one of my first statements on this game was that I was going to try and do everything in it, explore everything. I still have that as an ambition. I think to sum it up, I've got a little sentence at the end of each of these that tries to sum me up. It's a generally serious style, tinged with humour and lightheartedness. So I've got a bit of Monty Python in there. I've got a little bit of British humour, but generally it's quite serious. I am taking this. I'm taking the Northern Marches seriously, and the plight or the situation of these characters, NPCs that find themselves in this environment quite seriously, and I think that's I'm showing them respect. Okay, so that's AD&D, my first love. Classic Traveller, the second game that I floated on the channel. Different story there. I would say this is a grounded and personal vision of the Imperium. So I've got my own view of the Imperium and a frontier subsector. So this is basically how I just had this idea. I wanted to produce an Imperium and a frontier subsector that is mine, and I have ownership of it, and it's just modeled in my image of what I want. I have a very narrative style and interactive design process focused on characters and environment. So I really like to use the Traveller mechanics, like the character generation system and the world generation system, to produce hopefully a very rich view of what the character backgrounds are, and almost have them as the famous mini game for character generation, and the world setting. So this planet of Taro, I went into quite a bit of detail, but hopefully that was quite an entertaining as another mini game to do that as well, and that was almost part of the campaign and actually the playing of Traveller. A gradually evolving setting with layering of information, NPCs and adventure points. So this is evolving as we start to expand out from the Dragon Hotel where we've been placed, and then we get into the town of Taro, and then there's Taro itself, and then maybe off planet, and then out into the stars. I have comprehensive solo mechanics to govern activities, but the freedom to interpret results and outcomes. So what I've deliberately done for Traveller is if there are gaps, say the patron finding feature, I identified that I could really almost like jazz this up and make it quite comprehensive for my design, so that I could produce quite a realistic outcome of what a patron encounter is, and how we would get a patron, and how we would interact with the patron, and what type of mission we would get. And then it's over to me to interpret the results and outcomes. So I have some quite comprehensive mechanics to get me to that area, and then I just throw it to myself and say, Brian, catch this, and I've got to interpret those results and outcomes. And I'm really enjoying that aspect of Traveller, because it's quite free form, and you've really got to think on your feet. I have a desire to cover all aspects of the Traveller game universe, a bit similar to my AD&D aspiration. I want to try and cover everything. All the starship stuff, all the trade stuff, all the psionics, going to alien societies, alien artifacts, alien ruins, all that good stuff. So to sum up my Traveller approach, I would say it's a dynamic and reactive style. It's responsive to character interactions and campaign developments. So yeah, some people might say reactive is that you're not being proactive, you're not on the front foot. But what I mean is I'm reacting to what my mechanics are doing, and I'm having to interpret them on the spot, or take them away and come and present them to you in the next session. Okay, so that's Traveller. Hopefully that's a distinctive way of playing that's different from AD&D. The fact it's quite simple, because it's a science fiction game and it's a fantasy game, but I could be playing that the same way as I'm playing that. I could just be playing them all identically, And I'm hoping to get a bit of differentiation because I don't want to play them the same way. Okay, so RuneQuest. Now this really is different. So this is probably, I think I must admit, this is my biggest challenge, because I think that the secret to being comfortable, fully comfortable with a game system, is if you've been a games master or a dungeon master or a referee. Now, I have never been that, apart from maybe just doing some soloing on it. I've always been a player with RuneQuest, so I don't have maybe that inside track that a dungeon master or a referee has. So it's a bit of a learning curve for me too, and I don't always feel as comfortable with the overall, the interpretation of the rules and where I would have rules intervene. If I'd been a games master, I'd be used to how to structure adventures, how to apply rules at specific times, because I'd have experience. But I don't. I am just doing it from a player's point of view. So if you indulge me, I am on a bit of a learning trip with this too. I have got immersive and unique cultural and world setting. Well, that's what we have in the Great Vale that I'm designing for RuneQuest Second Edition. We have this immersive and unique cultural and world setting. Bronze Age culture, and I've got my own world setting. Higher and unavoidable struggles dominate this world and shape the character's fates. So we've got this big thing called the Chaos War. We've also got the struggle of the Empire, the Selenic Empire, wishing to dominate the Great Vale. So we've really got some major conflicts on the go in this world, and they are dominating basically everything. And they cast a very long shadow, including over the characters, and the character's fate is going to be entwined in those. I want to emphasize the special features of RuneQuest, so the individual races, the Bronze Age, the heroic culture, the cults, and the religion. I've only just started that, but I'm really trying to and have that as in my mindset all the time. These are the lenses I'm looking through the game at all the time. I've got an interactive and guided design with probability shaping evolution of the setting. So I've taken some of the learnings from my BX and I've put an interactive design into it, but I'm using it with this probability mechanic where I have high, medium and low probability, and that shapes the setting and hopefully guides it in a way that's reasonably logical, but I still get some surprises down the line. We have rich and compelling character backstories and the exploration of these. So character design, I had a lot of background stuff on that, and I hope to use that. And then also the utilization of all the system features, the combat, the skills, the runic magic. RuneQuest has got a lot of these unique features which you haven't seen in any of these other two games. I want to try to bring those out as much as possible, and maintain I call this maintain an element of eccentricity and weirdness. Now you might think, well, what's Brian on about? Actually, when I used to play, I was just remembering this because I thought, right, Brian, just take yourself back and remember what all these sessions were like, and what was one of the main takeaways that you had from RuneQuest. And one of the things, strangely enough, was I thought, quite often that was a bit weird, and or a bit eccentric. So I think RuneQuest has got that kind of eccentricity about it. It's not quite the classic swords and sorcery kind of AD&D type setting. It is quite idiosyncratic and can be quite weird. Things like ducks and that type of stuff. As soon as you get the ducks coming in, there's going to be a bit of weirdness. Things like dragon newts, they behave kind of strangely. There's something very otherworldly about RuneQuest, and I want to try to get that capture. I can't really explain it anymore. All I can say is there was an element of weirdness. Interpret that. It's not a criticism, I promise. And then to sum it up, I think for my RuneQuest one, I've got an immersive and zoomed in character experience, an adventuring scope. So it's quite a limited adventuring scope. I think it's going to be far more kind of very zoomed in. Um, when I was explaining the RuneQuest stuff before, I said the adventures, they're not going to be big rambling kind of underground escapades, mega dungeons and that type of. They were always quite small, contained. Everything was just on a much more intimate level. So I'm hoping to have that kind of feel when we go out adventuring. When we have interactions, it's going to be much more zoomed in. And focused on a fully designing the local region. So truly trying to design the local region. And I have a stage plan to expand organically when the time feels right. So I've shown you all that before. But yeah, I think a kind of a more intimate experience, I think, with RuneQuest. Um, you know, really get kind of under the character's skin and maybe see how their brains are working in this heroic society, and how they were interpreting things like religion and the cults in, you know, day-to-day life. And then we come to our old favourite, BX Dungeons and Dragons, the Barony of Westmark. Deliberately, I have got a faster playstyle, less focused on detail, and it's a rules light philosophy. So, great. I wanted to recapture the charm and excitement of first adventures. It's full of classic fantasy setting and tropes. Well, in fact, it is a classic fantasy setting. I'm really going to try and major than that. And I don't mind tropes. I love tropes. Bring them on for Westmark. I have and I've trialed and I have exported this interactive and structured play sessions where I have specific objectives and scope for each one. So I'm saying, right, I'm going to explore the town today. And we have lots of little games, mini games, where I go around and I explore the town. And, you know, like the last one we did, I said, right, we're going to go out and recruit a character. And so we did all sorts of things. We went to the market square, we put a poster up, we did this and that. We went up to the keep, asked questions about characters. We got a whole list of characters to recruit and interview further down the line. So it's that type of thing that I would have a specific objective in mind for each of my sessions. Archetypes, archetype-driven characters. You know, I don't make any apology for that. I like that feature. So I've got 10 archetypes. Our characters are going to be one of those each. And it'd be interesting to see how those different archetypes intertwine and also react and interact with the outside world. The barony setting concept is evolving in organic stages. So I've got my barony 1 to 6 sort of ideas. I'm going to make that evolve as and when I think is the right time. We're currently at barony stage 2, I think, which is, and I've got some nice ideas for how we randomly design my barony. You know, throw things down on a map and find out where all lots of things are. And then I've got some mechanics I'm kind of thinking about where I actually have some little mini conflicts going on between the different factions that are there, and almost like that will determine how they feel about each other and what their situation is when the characters start. So they're in this town of Freehold just now, doing lots of charactery, adventure stuff. But when it expands out maybe into the larger setting, I'll have my barony all set up. And there's been a bit of history going on just quite recently that I can bring as local character, and we might even draw out some of the personalities of the leaders. To, you know, like who's leading those elves? Are they in conflict with those orcs and those mountains? What are the dwarves thinking about that type of stuff? And I think that might be quite good fun. Narrative and descriptive with emphasis on action and excitement. So hopefully that sums up what I'm trying to do with this particular campaign. Action, excitement, but lots of narrative, lots of description, just generally fun. Less serious ethos, but still serious. Right, I think this is me trying to sum up what I feel about this. it's a less serious ethos, but still serious enough that we feel invested in the characters, the setting, and identify with their struggles and aims. So I'm saying it's light-hearted, it's fun, whatever, but I still want us to be able to take it seriously enough, and I think, identify with our characters, with their missions, and with the barony itself. And I think that it can only grow over time as we become sympathetic to the barony's plight. We feel quite invested in their struggle and their aims, and we are rooting for them. We're not just thinking, yeah, let's just get down that dungeon and pull all that loot out. We are thinking about the implications for the greater struggle, for the greater good, that type of stuff. Okay, good. Right, so that is me covered all the things I wanted to do. First, the main thing was to try and give you feedback for the fact that I am absolutely delighted with having 1,000 subscribers. And I get this K after my thing on the subscriber count. So you can never find out exactly how many I've got beyond that. I know because I've got this thing called YouTube Studio. But yeah, so thank you very much, I have to say. It's all down to you, and I hope you continue watching. Hopefully I've tantalized you with the fact that I am not going to change. And I'm not going to let it all get to my head and suddenly become like a rock star and just go off the edge. I'm going to stay quite grounded. It's more of the same, but I thought this thing here might tantalize you a bit too. And it's not, as I said, it's not a major deviation from current offering. Future initiative tutorials. So, as I was saying at the start, developing over the past month or so, people have been mentioning things. I've been saying, well, maybe I could do a character sheet. I was specifically thinking of RuneQuest. And I think RuneQuest has actually been the major one, the driver of this. There's a mention of character sheets, and one of the viewers said, oh, I'd love to see you actually fill out a character sheet and just go through it. And I thought, well, that might be quite a good idea. Other people might find that a bit boring. And then I brought up the Rurik Saga concept that I thought. And I thought, well, that Rurik thing, that was quite a nice little kind of narrative arc. We followed the journeys of Rurik. He did lots of like rules kind of stuff. And you learned as you went along with him. So, and I thought, well, why don't I have a bit of a creative approach to this? Apply this and have a creative approach to learning each of the systems on the channel. And I could do what I call a story arc idea for each game, starring a solo character who is placed in one of my own settings. So I would create a character and show it as a tutorial. I would place him or her in one of my own settings, one of these ones I have been presenting. So I'm not suddenly just throwing him into any game like Glorantha or some other Greyhawk or something. They are going to be embedded in my own setting and presented in a tutorial form which evolves. And then I would cycle through the major rule sections for each game. So I'd go through the combat, I'd go through the magic, I'd go through the skills, I'd go through, and I'd just show with little illustrations. Probably for each session, I would summarize the rule concepts. I'd give like a little summary at the start and say these are what the rule concepts are, and then play them through. And while I'm doing that, I would have some personalization because we've come to identify, say our character was called Rurik, we'd start to come to identify with our character. And maybe this first person isn't going to die because I have to use them again and again and again. And I could do a bit of limited role play, but there'll still be an element of jeopardy. We can't just have a person being impregnable. But the main purpose of them are they are vehicles for me to explain the rules, but they're not empty vessels. They are full of their own character, which will develop. And I thought that might be, as I say, quite a creative approach to learning and I would be presenting, say as an illustration, just to kind of put this into so you can visualize it. Say the RuneQuest one, I would visualize maybe there's about 8 or 10 chapters in the RuneQuest rules. I maybe would think, well, in total, I'll probably produce maybe 10 to 12 videos, each dealing with an aspect of those rules. and then once I've finished, maybe go back and maybe beef up a few that I think that need whatever. But we would probably have about 2 or 3 on combat, and maybe 2 on skills, and 1 or 2 on magic, that type of stuff. And I'd probably have 1 on cults, where I would just go through the cults and what the characters do in that. And it's really just all the rules, mechanics, and how they interface with that character. And I would illustrate how that character evolves or increases in experience, or does this type of divine intervention, or whatever. And likewise for any of the other rule sets. So for the Traveller character, I would cycle through 1 character. When I'm doing this, I'm not going to use any of my own rules. I have to, that'd be the first disclaimer. They are going to be purely based on the rules. So it's all going to be pure Classic Traveller, pure RuneQuest 2, pure AD&D, pure BX Dungeons and Dragons. I am not going to have any of my modifiers in it. I'm not going to do any of my things like archetypes and whatever. It's going to be vanilla. I could maybe at a later stage go back and say, well, this is what it would be like if you use my thing. But you've got the original, you've got these, they're talking about archetypes. I wouldn't do an archetype for this character for my BX tutorial. I would just do it based on the rules. But you could always go back and see one of the episodes where I was doing character creation, and you've got those rules there that I had produced, and I am yet to put up onto the internet, that you could just you could overlay with. Maybe as later points I could do it with as an additions. I could say, well, actually, if you take tutorial 3, which deals with character creation, this is the way I can do it in my campaign, because I've got these archetype rules, I've got these personality rules, and this is how I overlay it on that base thing. But remember, all my solo mechanics are designed for a solo play thing. This is more to do with just an explanation of the rules and how I play. But it will be kind of, I think I will try to keep it geared as if you were trying to use it for a solo game, but in a kind of vanilla way. So you could use like BX with Mythic or whatever engine, but I'm just showing you how to actually play those things. And I'm not saying that I'm really qualified on these things, but I do, I have to know how these rules work. I found to my cost that I wasn't really doing the surprise rules in AD&D, and I did a little kind of as an apology to all my channel subscribers who'd watched me do about 5 surprise rolls wrong. I did a kind of little mini tutorial to that. I would carry on in that kind of spirit, because I had like a few little orcs with my characters, and I just went through the stages and showed it. It would be something similar to that, but maybe with a bit more narrative and structure to it. Okay, I think I have maybe taken enough of your time. I'm just hoping that you think that that's a good idea and complementary to anything I'm doing. So you'll have this resource under a different playlist. I'll just call it channel tutorials for each of the different games. I'm gonna have to get some more thumbnails. That is one thing I am running out of, is thumbnails, and I don't know what the people think. It'd be quite interesting to get feedback on that. My thumbnails, my ethos was for the AD&D ones, I would use anything that was kind of AD&D, fantasy, D&D-ish, but make it black and white, and just put it as a, it's old art and whatever, so I don't have to bother with copyright. I could really, if I could find out who these people are, put a little note in my stuff to say thank you very much for letting me use your art. But that being said, I use all those thumbnails for my AD&D one. For the Traveller one, I just thought I'd just go for a plain Traveller, something, Adventures in the Far Future, that type of thing on the box. And RuneQuest likewise, just a big RuneQuest, because I didn't think I could scrabble around for all the different types of art. And I think for BX, I have gone for a bit of a theme with BX, because I've thought, well, I'll try to use all the old BX type art as much as I can, or stuff that's related, like their modules, Keep on the Borderlands, that type of stuff. But give it, I think it's called, is it like an amber look, or honey or something. You can put a filter on in photos, and they all have the same kind of look, where they go kind of almost like a parchment color. And that's my distinction on that. But for these things, I don't know what to do, whether just to have them as, have my own thumbnails, whatever. But yeah, that's a first world problem. I think I can deal with that later on down the line. Okay, right. What I just wanted to finish with is just to say once again, thank you very much for getting me to 1,000 plus subscribers. I really appreciate your investment in the channel, and the fact that a lot of you have to put up with me wittering on. But as I say, I'm very grateful that you're along for the ride. There's a lot still to come. This is only really, to me, just the beginning of this channel. I really wanted to, I think you've seen from my quite ambitious plans, I want to cover a lot of games. I want to continue with my campaigns as far as they can go. And also with this tutorial idea, I want to try and beef up almost my intellectual property that I have as backup to some of these things that I'm talking about. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.